I just got back to my friend's flat after seeing Diana the musical in concert in London. I'm so glad I flew out for it. Like, I was really on the fence, and then I decided like a month ago I was going to do it, and honestly, it was so much fun, worth the flight, worth the whole trip. It was just a really great night. Getting to watch Diana the musical in a room full of British people in London was like, I could not have predicted what it would be like. I'll get into some of the changes, but just like general audience reaction was chaos. I've seen a lot of shows in London. Obviously I don't live here, but I've seen a lot on the West End, especially in the last like couple of years. And I've never been in an audience with like this much reaction. I've heard a lot about pantos because we're in like the holiday season, and I assume this is like the closest thing to going to a panto show. Very early on, when Diana's talking to Camilla, but doesn't know it's Camilla, and then she ends with being like, "Oh, I'm Camilla Parker Bowles." The entire audience starts booing, like loudly booing. It was bonkers. And like basically anytime Camilla and Charles said anything negative, boos, hisses. It was unbelievable. I've never heard people hissing in a theater, like full snake sounds. It was incredible. And then the biggest boo of the night was for a line that I think was added. Nathan would know better than me. That was about Margaret Thatcher and during Secrets and Lies, which is now called The Visit, where the entire audience just was like going crazy. A friend who sat in another section said that someone in her section went to the house attendant and complained that the audience was too loud, which they were loud, but it was just so much fun being in this like giant, crowded, excited audience. I don't know. It kind of reminded me of Closing. It was just a really, really good vibe, and I'm so happy to have been there. As for the differences between Diana the musical and Diana the concert, first off, obviously the big one, there are two Dianas in this production. We have Diana Spencer, played by Maya Quanson Breed, and you have Diana, Princess of Wales, played by Carrie Ellis. And I thought it worked really well. I honestly loved the two Dianas. Essentially, and I don't think it worked all the time, but I think it worked most of the time. But Diana, Princess of Wales, older Diana, Carrie Ellis, she basically like haunts Diana Spencer. So in the first like kind of beginning of the show, like you see Charles when he's courting Diana, young Diana, and older Diana is sitting there doing like all of the commentary. So like during Worst Job in England, like she does all of the like ensemble lines about how she's gonna be picked apart by the media, how she's never gonna have time to herself, like all of that sung by older Diana, and it just really, really hit. And they cut Diana's like attendant butler character, so older Diana kind of plays that like mentor-esque role to younger Diana, and she never like acknowledges older Diana. It just like, I don't know, it works subconsciously, I think. And I really, really enjoyed the way that like during every interaction with Charles, like older Diana is there. Like when he proposes, she's the one who's like, this was a bad proposal. That is said by younger Diana on Broadway. But I thought it worked. And they turned I Will into this duet between the two Dianas, and I thought it was really, really, really beautiful. They cut a ton from the show. First act was 45 minutes, second act was 35 minutes. So a lot of stuff is gone. Again, some of it I was fine with, some of it didn't work. They cut almost all of Happiness, but I kind of like how they did it. I love that song, but I like how they went with it, which is basically they cut both of the sons being born. I don't know if it's because they just did not want to touch Will and Harry at all. Although they did mention them later, so I don't know. So Camilla breaks up with him. He goes to Diana. She tells him she's pregnant. He's all excited. They sing Happiness, literally they sing it 3 times through, and then the phone rings and it's Camilla asking to get back together. And then it goes right into Simply Breathe, which now has a new name, but it's a couple verses. It's like they don't do the full song, but they do some of it. It's a baby, and then they go right into Modern Way. So they've taken Happiness and Simply Breathed and combined it into a song called A Baby. Barbara Cartland was completely cut, which didn't bother me, but it meant that the Queen did a lot less. They also cut her verse from Fuck You Dress. She's like, the Queen is much, much, much smaller of a role. I don't know if it's because they were like, or if just it made sense, but she's really only in the beginning and then does Officer's Wife and Most Modern Ways. I'm still like convinced that Pretty Pretty Girl is like the greatest Act 1 closing on Broadway in the last like 10 years. And James Hewitt was wild. So instead of the Barbara Cartland Queen character introducing it, it's older Diana, and she does like a little monologue that's very funny, and then James Hewitt appears. Because it's a concert version, they didn't do like full sets or costumes or any of that. It was very, very bare bones, like chairs, and older Diana wore like the Harvard sweatshirt for most of the first act and like a little suit for the second act, and younger Diana wore the like iconic sheep, the red and white sheep sweater. Because of the reduced Barbara Cartland, the biggest thing is they cut him and her completely, which I was bummed about. They have like, they put it in the, like it's in the program, but it's literally like half of a verse from James and Diana and nothing, like none of the song. They never call it him and her or any of that, which I was kind of sad about because I really like that song. And then basically the end of Act 1, Pretty Pretty Girl, is where they switch from young Diana to old Diana taking over. I shouldn't even call her old Diana, but you know what I mean, like older Diana. So at the end of the song, Carrie Ellis sings the whole song. They do like the kind of end bit with the all the ensemble, and then she walks back on stage and she's in like a hot dress. So that was cool. And then alternatively, younger Diana is not on stage during Fuck You Dress, and so Carrie Ellis sings the entire song, and I was kind of like, oh, we're not actually gonna see the dress. And then younger Diana walked on in the actual dress, and everyone went insane, and it was a very, very fun moment. It kind of felt like younger Diana like getting her revenge a little bit, so I thought it worked, but it was really silly and fun. There were a lot of moments that like weren't explained, and I don't know if it's because it wasn't a bridge book or because they just assumed that British people would know that. Like for Movies in Most Modern Ways, they never really explained the dance at all. I think it was more just like known here, so they didn't need to like explain like what the Royal Ballet was or what the dance between, like, because people know that moment here so iconically. And I also think the same with Andrew Morton. They never explain who Andrew Morton is. They never really go into like the book. They just, so they go from basically Pretty Pretty Girl reprise right into the words came pouring out, and it's her being like, I'm taking back my life, and she just picks up the phone and calls Andrew. There's none of the explanation, none of the like, I'm gonna send you recordings. Like, it's just straight up like into the song. Again, I think it's probably because they were trying to abridge the book more than like an actual just script change, but thought it was interesting. The match was one of my favorite moments because the audience was so hyped during the whole thing, and you could just feel all the energy. And Alice Fern, I didn't even talk about her yet, but the way that she played Camilla was so good. She did this insane like option up during Miss You Most on Sundays that just like shook me. And they had such good chemistry, Alice and Carrie Ellis. I was so happy. And was also slightly different because they did If, but they cut the like actually her dying, which Kate said is how they ended it in San Diego. So basically they do the like montage where they talk about all the charity work she did, and then she just finishes the song and the lights just go out and she's in the darkness. And so I think that's part of, I don't know if it's like because they just didn't want to try to deal with like explaining the death, or it felt too like gruesome doing this concert setting. It's sort of on a happier note where sort of like she's reclaiming her story, even though all of us know how it actually ended. I'm sure I'm forgetting like a million things, but it was just a really great night and absolutely just bonkers. But yeah, I would honestly really like to see this. Like I'd love for them to actually time to like workshop this and do more Diana the Musical. Because basically for this, I was talking to someone after the show and they did like 3 days of rehearsal. The orchestra had like 1 rehearsal and the Sitzprobe. And like, so it was very like, bare bones isn't even the right word, but just like it was early. They didn't have much time to rehearse or anything like that. But I was really impressed by what it was in terms of how long they had to make it happen. It was very silly. It was very goofy. There were a lot of like lighting and some sound issues, but you know, it is what it is. It's a concert version of a show. Overall though, I love Diana the Musical. I really do. Nothing will not make me love this show. I was so happy to be here. I still am like beaming. I'm like, but it was like just a really wonderful experience, and just getting to see it with people who had never seen it before and getting to see it with friends. It brought me so much joy. Mostly like New York City Center Encores. I'm talking to you. I feel like this would be a really great part for your season.